Welcome to my channel. She was just a nurse in 25C, until the F-35 pilots snapped to attention. It sounds like the beginning of some military myth, doesn't it? A rumor whispered in hallways, a tale half believed until someone who was there swears it was true. But this one isn't just a rumor. It's a story about a woman who walked quietly through her days, unnoticed by most, until the moment her presence changed everything. Her name was Emily Carter. To the outside world, she was an ordinary Air Force nurse, stationed in Ward 25C of the base hospital. She wore the same pale scrubs every morning, her hair tied back in the same neat bun, and her shoes squeaked the same tired squeak against the polished floors. Her badge said Lieutenant Carter, but she never introduced herself that way. To patients, she was simply Emily. Ward 25C wasn't glamorous. It wasn't where generals toured or where dignitaries shook hands for photo ops. It was the recovery wing, the place where young men and women came after surgeries, accidents, and combat injuries. It was a place full of pain, but also quiet resilience. Emily had been there for 2 years, long enough to learn the rhythms, the hiss of oxygen tanks, the clipped orders of doctors, the muted groans in the night. She had also learned how to speak softly when others barked, how to smile when someone was breaking, and how to give dignity to those who felt like they had lost it. But to the pilots, the ones who flew F-35s streaking across the desert sky, Emily was invisible. They saw her once or twice when they dropped by the ward to visit a friend, but they never knew her name. To them, she was just a nurse in 25C. That changed the night of the crash. It was a training exercise gone wrong. 2 F-35s had taken off into the twilight, their engines howling like thunder across the base. The desert air shimmered in the fading sun as they disappeared into the horizon. Moments later, radio chatter erupted. One jet had suffered catastrophic failure. The pilot, Captain James Hawk Henderson, ejected seconds before the aircraft spiraled into the ground. The base shook with alarms. Emergency crews roared out in convoys of flashing red lights. By the time they brought Henderson back, his body was broken in ways that made even the hardened medics swallow hard. Ward 25C was waiting. And Emily was waiting. She met them at the door as they wheeled Henderson in. His helmet was gone, his face smeared with blood and desert sand, his breath shallow and ragged. His flight suit was shredded, his legs twisted at unnatural angles. He wasn't a hero in that moment, he was just a man clinging to life. The doctors worked quickly, but it was Emily who anchored the room. She steadied shaking hands, adjusted IV lines, pressed gauze to wounds that refused to stop bleeding. When the others barked orders, she whispered words of comfort into Henderson's ear, as though he could hear her through the haze of morphine and pain. Hours passed. At last, the surgeons stepped back, exhausted, and left Henderson in the care of the night staff. That was Emily. She stayed. The days that followed were brutal. Henderson drifted in and out of consciousness, tethered to machines that beeped and hummed like mournful sentinels. Pilots from his squadron visited, their uniforms crisp, their eyes haunted. They stood at his bedside for a minute or two, saluted, then left in silence. But Emily stayed. She wiped his forehead when fever raged. She changed his bandages when blood seeped through. She whispered stories of the sunrise outside his window, the desert winds that rattled against the hospital glass, the ordinary world he couldn't yet touch. And slowly, Henderson began to respond. His fingers twitched against hers. When she held his hand, his eyes fluttered open when she read the letters his squadron sent. One night, his lips cracked into a faint smile when she joked about the coffee in the nurse's lounge being strong enough to power a jet. He lived because of the surgeons. But he healed because of Emily. Word began to spread through the base. The pilots of the 72nd Fighter Squadron, men and women who thought themselves untouchable, started talking about the quiet nurse in 25C. Carter, they whispered. She's different. Some had seen her sitting at Henderson's bedside long after her shift ended, scribbling notes to track his progress. Others had caught her outside the ward at dawn, whispering prayers for his recovery. She wasn't seeking recognition. She wasn't building a reputation. She was just doing what she believed she was meant to do. And the pilots noticed. Weeks passed. Henderson regained enough strength to sit up, then to stand with help, then to take his first painful steps across the ward. Every milestone, Emily was there, steady as a shadow. One afternoon, Henderson's squadron gathered to see him walk unaided for the first time. The ward was crowded, the air thick with anticipation. Henderson rose slowly from the bed, his jaw clenched, his body trembling with effort. He took one step, then another. The room erupted in cheers. But Henderson didn't look at his fellow pilots. He looked at Emily. "You," he whispered hoarsely. "You did this." She shook her head. "No, Captain, you did." And yet, everyone in that room knew the truth. The moment that sealed everything came on a day Emily never expected. The squadron was scheduled for a ceremony, a rededication of the base's air wing. The pilots would line up in full dress uniform, medals shining, boots polished. Henderson, though still recovering, insisted on attending, leaning on a cane as he stood among his brothers and sisters. Emily was off duty that day, walking quietly across the tarmac, a clipboard in her hands. She wasn't part of the ceremony. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't supposed to be noticed. But then it happened. One by one, the pilots of the 72nd Fighter Squadron turned. Their eyes found her, the nurse from 25C, the woman who had carried one of their own back from the edge of death. And as if on cue, as though some unspoken order had passed among them, they snapped to attention. Hundreds of boots struck the ground in perfect unison. Backs straightened, hands shot up in crisp salutes. Not to a general, not to a flag, to Emily Carter, the nurse in 25C. The silence that followed was electric. Emily froze, her face flushing, her hands trembling on the clipboard. I'm just a nurse," she stammered. But Henderson's voice rose clear above the silence. "No," he said, "you are the reason I stand here today. You are the reason any of us remember that behind the jet, behind the helmet, behind the call sign, we are human. And you cared for the human, when all we saw was the pilot." The crowd remained motionless, their salutes unwavering. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She had spent her life serving quietly, unseen, never expecting acknowledgement. And now, on the vast expanse of the tarmac, the fiercest warriors of the skies stood in honor of her. In the weeks after, Emily returned to her ward. She still tied her hair back the same way. Her shoes still squeaked against the same floors. She still whispered encouragements to patients who felt forgotten. But she carried something new now, a memory etched into her soul. Not of glory, not of applause, but of the moment when her unseen work was finally seen. And every time an F-35 thundered into the sky above the base, pilots whispered her name. Not as a nurse, not as a lieutenant, but as the one who reminded them that courage is not only in the cockpit, it is in the quiet, unseen hands that hold broken people together. So when people ask, who was she? The answer is simple. She was Emily Carter, just a nurse in 25C. Until the day the F-35 pilots snapped to attention.